Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alan Blumkin. I'm hosting this podcast for Ralph Pico, who is unavailable tonight. I have two distinguished guests tonight. One is regular on the Tuesday night podcast that we do, George Case III. Welcome, George.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alan.
And the other one is a lady who's doing her second podcast, and Pam Henderson.
Hello. Good evening, everyone.
Yes. So, if you two can, think of something to start with, be my guest.
Well, you know what, Alan and Pam, I'd like to start only because I've communicated with Pam many times on Facebook, and I've seen a lot of her baseball memorabilia collection, and she has some incredible items. And then the most mind-boggling to me is to see the number of issues of the sporting news that she has. And I just wanted to, talk to you a little bit, Pam, and where that all came from, how you got started, and the interest, and I think it would be very enlightening to all of us to hear you talk about your great interest in baseball history.
This is why I put the two of you together.
Well,
because I saw all your posts I see and old George's responses I see, so I figured, you two should get acquainted. So, Pam, if you want to start about, a lot of things that you have, with especially the old sporting news.
Yeah, that's the ones that I love the most in my collection are my sporting news, and I've actually been I bought them here and there over the years for maybe 30 years. I always liked the content of the old ones and, the style of writing, just how baseball was, back in the day. And so here a few years ago, I liked them so much, I just started picking up, like a year's run of them. And I accumulated some pretty good years that I found interesting, and I learned from them every day. They're wonderful, and I kind of get inspiration from them. And a lot of the players, I have to admit, I've never even heard of them. And I run across them in the sporting news and do a little further investigation of them, and kind of try and share it with people. What I find interesting, and what good came out of the player. I tend not to talk about the bad because why.
Well, Pam, let me just ask you a couple things. First of all, do you have actually the original Sporting News copies, or do you have, have you made copies? I mean, there has to be a huge collection, and how you keep them stored and all that, it's incredible.
Yeah, well, newspaper is kind of tough. I keep it in climate control, and I lay them out flat. I have some containers that I keep them in, so I can lay them out flat and, keep from doing any further damage. Of course, with technology and taking pictures, I can lighten them up. They're yellow by nature for the most part, and they're kind of brittle, but I take good care of them, and don't lend them out. I keep them to myself, and I just really love the artwork, and like I said, I love the style of writing back in the day, and I'm kind of stuck in the past. It seems like I don't have a lot of interest in modern day baseball too much. I mean, I keep up with the scores, and kind of see where the standings are, but I rarely watch any modern day baseball. So
Well, Pam, you're pretty much, you're preaching to the choir with Alan and myself and a couple of the other people that we're on with our monthly podcast, because we're people who love baseball the way it used to be and really are not enamored with the game the way it's become. All the crazy rules and everything that's happened and the amount of money that's being spent and the amount of money that the players are making, I mean, it's a far cry from the old days, and your collection, you probably have it dating back to what, the 40s or 50s, or
I have some that go back in the 30s.
Do you really? Okay, because I've mentioned to you before, when my dad was playing in the late 30s, early 40s, the Sporting News was known as a broadsheet. It was a large newspaper. Similar in size to like the New York Times or the Washington Post, and then later they shrunk the size down to what they call a tabloid size, and then after that, instead of being the so-called baseball paper of the world, they started to delve into other sports, and I think it took away a lot of the interest and a lot of the folks who really enjoyed. And ball players themselves, they would, get a Sporting News and look for their name and their batting average and the features that were about there, and then some of the cartoons, the front pages, the drawings, and as you said, the writings were. The Sporting News had a lot of tremendous writers who wrote for the other newspapers, but they were syndicated in the Sporting News. So there's some real gems there, and I congratulate you on your efforts and everything you've done.
Well, they're a joy to me, and I have a big collection also of like old Sports Illustrated, and other programs, and I just kind of like paper, and I like one thing that really attracts me about the Sporting News are they're kind of short articles, and it's not like committing to a book, and I have a kind of a short attention span, so they kind of work well with that.
Well, you touched on earlier about the brittleness and the yellowing of newsprint, and I congratulate you if you can keep that in pretty much pristine order. If you have the wrapped in cellophane or whatever you do, keep them fresh, because if they're exposed to sunlight, as you know, they will yellow and they will become extremely brittle.
Well, yes, and humidity is not their friend either, But that's one of the things that I just make room for, and so I cherish them. I have a lot of things in my collection. I like bats, gloves, programs, autographs. I'm into vintage autographs and, some contemporary autographs. But my Sporting News are something that I enjoy the most.
Yeah, I'm
did
jealous.
Did you ever, Pam, let me just ask you this. Did you ever visit the Sporting News offices when they were in St. Louis? I think they're not being published anymore, but, the fact is that was the mecca for, baseball sports writing with the Sphinx and that kind of thing that was really a tremendous asset to baseball and history because the way they covered the game.
Yeah, well, I never had the opportunity, but I would like to have, and you're right, it was kind of a hub, and, you had, I think, Rawlings, and, baseball was really important.
Yes, it was. St. Louis, yeah. St. Louis was the headquarters not only for Sporting News, but also for Rawlings. And, Rawlings back then, for many, many years, Rawlings was the dominant manufacturer. Rawlings and Wilson had the two primary glove manufacturers, and it's been opened up a little bit more now. And you had Spalding and McGregor. They were one time very much in the professional ranks, but they've pretty much gotten out of baseball and into other sports. But Rawlings and Wilson are still providing the top-of-the-line gloves as well as many other price point gloves for baseball.
Yeah,
Right.
George and Pam, I'm jealous because I didn't discover the sporting news until 1958 when I was 15. And I couldn't believe it when I first got my first copy of it. And I would renew every year when the guide was the premium.
Right.
Yeah, it was an extra buck, I think, for the guy or whatever. Yeah, and I did. A friend of mine and I did visit the St. Louis headquarters in 1972, and they gave us a tour, even though we just walked off the street.
Wow,
we were
that
there
would be
to watch
special.
a ball game that night, and so anyway, they're taking us through the all the operations and everything. And they showed the woman who was guiding showed me a cover. And I said that was never used, and she says, "How do you know that?" I said, "Because Earl Weaver was on the cover after for the wrap up after the World Series in 1971, and they didn't win."
Ah, okay. Okay.
So it's amazing, but it was very, very interesting, and I just wanted to import. But I do somewhere in this mess here, I have a 49 through 53 on microfilm. I don't know if that's worth anything anymore.
Well, it is to you. The information contained therein is still there. You miss out on probably the good cartoons and advertising and that sort of thing. But
yeah, I bought those because I wanted to track. I was doing a project on players who lost time to serving during the Korean War. I mean, it had to be over there, but most of them were stateside. So Willie Mays played, I think, 34 games in 1952 before he went into the Army. And I wanted to see if he had missed any.
Ah, okay.
So I went from the opening of the season to the time he was inducted, and I found a few other interesting little tidbits on the way. But it was great. I love the AAA box scores.
Oh, yeah. The minor league, I mean, that's how people kept up with it, There's so many sources for people to go to now that I guess, it's not as important as it was. But in its day, it had the best of everything, And I really like the way they covered the Warriors. Feel like they, tried their best to keep, people in the States, informed. And it was just it was a lot more important to people than it is, these days. There's so many other sources.
Because I agree totally with you and George. I can't watch it anymore. I haven't watched the game this year. If I'm interested in a local game, I'll put the radio on. But I can't bring myself to watch it.
Yeah. Well, that's probably the best way to take in a game anyway, is to listen to
I keep up with the through the MLB.com app and the ESPN app. That's how I keep up with the scores. But I just can't bring myself to watch it.
Yeah. Well, I think
Pam,
told me.
Pam, I'm interested. I'm interested. Is your collection? You have a room in your house dedicated to all your baseball memorabilia. How can you display everything? I mean, it's just incredible.
It's right now it's in disarray. I'm making a move to Florida, but there's some things that I have that I can put my hands on. But I've been collecting for a long time, George. And I have about 1,000 square foot room in the basement of my house that's, finished out, and, I have a lot of stuff in there, but I have a lot of stuff in storage too. So, one of these days I'm going to have to get rid of it. I have 2 daughters that, they're not all that interested in it, but I figure it'll be a kind of fun thing to dispose of it, and I used to do shows. My mother was a promoter out in
I was going to ask you
area.
That's how you really got your interest, right? Your mother promoted memorabilia shows or something.
She
many
did
years
really
ago.
big ones, and I mean, you'd have maybe 150, 200 vendors, and a lot of them would come from all over the country to do these shows, and you meet people, and I used to find the oldest people in the room, and talk to them because I felt like they knew more than anybody else. So, I had a lot of encouragement, back in the day, and it was fun. I dealt a lot in paper, so I had my customers that would come and look for books and magazines, and I covered not only baseball but football, and Dallas is a big town for football, and the Rangers, she did their winter carnival for them every year, and that was always a lot of fun. All the players would come out, and it was just a fun time, and meet the fans, and she'd have autograph guests, and it was just fun times for quite a few years there.
Did you used to help your mother? I mean, were you, as a youngster or in your younger days, did you, work the booths with her and get a chance to meet collectors as well as, any athletes that you were featuring at the show?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I was probably already in my late 20s. She lived in Dallas, and I've always lived, here in Alabama. And and so I would go out for the shows to help. And then, I bought a bat collection from a guy. And my mom said, well, why don't you come and, set up a table? And, the rest was history, and so a lot of times I was working my own booth, but yeah, I absolutely helped her, and got to meet a lot of people, and my brother Randy usually sat with the guest and handed them the whatever they were getting signed, and so he really gets the best stories,
Right.
But
now,
yeah.
did your mom make the arrangements for with the show promoters or whatever to bring the athletes into the show?
She was the promoter.
She was? Okay. So it was her responsibility to bring the athletes there then.
Oh yes.
Right.
And I was talking with a friend about how much preparation goes into those events. It's a lot. The scheduling. A lot of times it would work in her favor because the Dallas area is somewhere where players would be coming in at that time, and it would work out.
Right.
And of course, it was kind of a lot of money at different times to bring people in, and then you charge accordingly. She tried to keep prices down. Of course, this was in the 80s, 90s. So, yeah.
Did you have any problem with no shows where you've been publicizing a certain ball player and for whatever the reason they didn't show up?
I don't remember. I'm sure it probably happened, but it didn't happen often because her husband was an attorney and he was really good at drawing up contracts.
Right. No, that's good. Good. Right.
Now, I do remember Roger Clements playing golf one morning, and he was late getting there, and, all the people she would, have designated times for different, guests, and, people were standing in line waiting to get his autograph, and, he's late.
Right.
So she she catches him out in the parking lot on his way in, and she chewed him out for it.
Oh, yeah. I can, Pam, I can imagine. I've been through that many times in the profession that I was in. I mean, we used to do shows and appearances with athletes, and, if somebody didn't show up, or I can remember the first time, it wasn't baseball, it had to do with tennis, but I had a tennis promotion with Stan Smith. And Stan Smith back then was ranked number 1 in the United States as far as tennis. Well, he had a conflict, and I didn't know it until the last minute. All of a sudden, I get a phone call after we had done the publicity, and I'm sitting in front of all these people, and I get a phone call, and I hate to tell you, but I won't be there. And I had to, explain to the crowd who came out to see Stan Smith, unfortunately, I'm sorry, but he won't be here. So... I understand that part of the business, and it can be a real problem.
No, it can. It can. A lot of stress, because you're answering to people, and somebody's got to stand up and face the crowd, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I was almost a brand new salesman. I'd been on the job for a couple of months, and all of a sudden I've got to stand up there and explain why this world renowned tennis player will not be there. And it was quite an experience. You learn, but I had another one with a major league ball player. He came to an appearance, and he's got a chaw of tobacco in his mouth. And he's spitting all over the floor. And I said to him, I said, Jesus, I said, you got a bunch of little kids here came to see you and you get your autograph. They don't want to get, tobacco juice all over everything. So,
hey, a red sippy cup.
Yeah, right. There you go. But that was something. I mean, you learn by these things. And, I love baseball. I love memorabilia, but I always was fortunate because with my dad being a ball player, I knew some players myself, and the fact that my dad did some appearances and stuff, and I remember he did a show one time, and he didn't even charge expenses. They just came in. He said, "It's not that bad," and I said, "Pop, at least they should be, pay you for your tolls and your lunch and everything." He said, "I'm not too worried about that." So, but it's one of those kind of things where
mom shows.
Yeah, I mean, you'd like to have relationships with people, but it can be a problem, that's for sure. And your experience there, Pam, I'm sure was very beneficial. But I'd like to talk a little bit again about your collection, because you and I have exchanged messages on Facebook and that kind of thing. And the first time I think that I really talked to you, you had done something about being in Alabama, and the name of Fred Singleton came up. And I got back to you, and I said, geez, Fred Singleton, I said, does he have a sporting goods store? And you got back to me and said, yes, he did. Well, it just so happened that one of my early sales calls, I had one of my salesmen, and we walked into Singleton Sports in Alabama, and I introduced myself to Fred, and he said to me, by the way, he said, are you related to the ball player? And I said, yeah, I sure am. He said, well, you probably didn't know that when you came in here, but your dad and I were teammates with Washington. So
How about that?
Yep.
How about that? Well, not only was he a baseball player, but he played for the University of Alabama.
Right. I think he was an All-American football player, was he?
He sure was, and
right.
I tend to think that he played on some of the really good teams, and of course I think he predated Bear Bryant, but yes, I mean he would have been royalty for more than one reason here,
Right. Well, you're down there, Pam, you're down there in football country. I mean, University of Alabama, I mean, that's incredible. And with your baseball background, I'm sure that, baseball sometimes has to take a back seat to football in the state that you're in.
Oh, absolutely it does. And, I mean, we have our fair share of really great baseball players from here, and
right.
but everything is second to the University of Alabama.
Right.
So I mean, it's just a rich history, and we have the minor league, the Barons, and, they've been here for forever. And, as far as baseball fix, a lot of the people here are Atlanta Braves fans.
Right.
It's just, a couple of hours over to Atlanta. And so that was kind of fun growing up, with Hank.
Hello?
Alan, I guess he got cut off, or she got cut off.
Okay, she'll probably call back, hopefully.
Yeah. That happens. As you and I know from experience, that happens sometimes. So.
Oh yeah.
Hey, while we're waiting for Pam to call back, I wanted to.
Okay, I'm back.
You're back. Okay,
I don't know
good.
What happened?
That's all right. Pam, Alan and I were talking. We've had some similar experiences to that, where you're talking, all of a sudden you get cut off. So we were just waiting for you to call us back.
Okay. Yeah, we were talking about Hank Aaron, and I was born in 1957, so that put me at a good age for Hank Aaron and his all his home runs. That was
right.
kind of the thing in the 70s. And it was just really a good time.
Well, you might not be aware of this, but when Hank Aaron hit number 715, he hit it off a very close personal friend of mine, Al Downey. And
yes.
you might have recalled the instance, and Al and I have talked about it many times, and he's very modest, and Al is just a really great guy, but he used to always just say, he said, hey, Hank was going to hit it off somebody, he just happened to hit it off me. So
yeah. Well, I mean, it couldn't have happened for a nicer guy, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, you're going to be remembered for it, but hey.
George, tell Pam about the time Willie Mays came into your dad's store.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this is, you're talking about that period of time, Pam, in the, say, 50s and so forth. But what Alan's referring to is that my dad had a sporting goods store in Trenton, New Jersey. And after he retired, he got a phone call, 1950, from the New York Giants front office, and they said, George, we're sending a young man down. We think he's a pretty good prospect. His name is Willie Mays. And he said, give him whatever equipment he needs and send the bill to us. And my dad just laughed later in telling that story. He said, yeah, that's sort of an understatement. Willie turned out to be more than just a pretty good ball player.
Absolutely. I hope you use that in your store. I hope you
it's one of those things where I've got a lot of baseball stories, but the fact is that Willie played in Trenton for about 2 months. He left your area. He left Birmingham. He was playing down in Birmingham, went to Trenton, and then went to Minneapolis, and then the next year, he made it to New York City. So, my dad had a lot of good baseball experiences, but that was the one story that he always loved to tell because, Willie was just a 20-year-old kid walking in, and my dad was happy to help him any way he could. But Willie needed some equipment, and he didn't have any money, and the Giants said, hey, give him whatever he needs and just send the bill to us up here in New York.
Oh, I'm sure that was a big thrill for him to be able to walk in and probably get equipment and things that, he would have never been able to have afforded before.
Well, that was the thing, Pam. Back then, unlike today, guys are coming up, they're not making any money at all. And, Willie was just a kid off the sandlots almost. And here he is walking into a city and, needed some help. And, my dad was happy to help him because the Giants had known my father with his reputation as a ball player, and knew that he knew about baseball equipment, so he wasn't going to, lead Willie the wrong way. But on the other hand, Willie was really just a youngster who needed some advice. Never been probably into a major city. All of a sudden, he's in Trenton, and 2 months later, he's in Minneapolis, and shortly after that, he's in New York City. So, for what Willie had become, he was just a youngster with great talent, but he was one that, the future, who knew what the future was going to be. But, the fact is that when the Giants said to my dad, well, we're sending this young man down, we think he's a pretty good prospect. Well, obviously, he turned out to be more than just a pretty good prospect.
He was playing in the Negro Leagues when he was 17.
Right.
For the Birmingham Black Barons.
Right.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
It was. And Alan, Pam, I wanted to ask you, too, something about being in the South, and I hear your accent. Alan and I are, we're Northeastern people, New York and Philly and that kind of thing. But my dad developed a little bit of a Southern accent because so many of the ball players that played with him and against him were from the South. And
right.
So he was used to, picking up this Southern accent. And later on in his life, occasionally, he would either say something that would sound Southern, and I used to say to him, I said, Pop, I said, you got that Southern drawl again. And he just laughed. But that's the way it was. I mean, a lot of the guys were from, the South, and because the weather was good, and that's where they were used to playing a heck of a lot more baseball down the South than they did up in the Northeast.
Yes, you just didn't have a lot of choices, And I think Clark Griffith favored, Southern players. I really do.
Yeah, well, I think he did. He had some great Southern players. I mean, he had Cecil Travis and Buddy Lewis and Buddy Meyer. I mean, those guys were great players that Clark had, and they were all teammates of my father. My father knew them all very well, but he used to love to hear the way they talked, and some of that rubbed off on him.
Well, he probably had to slow things down a little bit to have conversations with them.
Well, that's it. I used to say to people, I say, yeah, they didn't know what we were saying, and we probably didn't know what they were saying, but you tried to communicate anyhow. So
do the best we can, don't we?
That's it. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. George, wasn't Early Wynn from Alabama?
What's that, Alan?
Early Wynn. I think he was from Alabama also.
Yeah, I think he was. Early was, he was part Indian too. And, Early and my dad were very close. And matter of fact, they were not only teammates, but they also were on the coaching staff of the 68 Twins. Early was the pitching coach, and my dad was the third base coach. So, but Early was, one of those great Hall of Fame pitchers and a terrific guy. And really was rather difficult. He used to, the mound was his, and that was his office. And I've told the story before that his son, who I knew, Joe Early, got up and he hit one back. He was taking batting practice. He hit one back against his father. His father had to duck, and the next pitch, Joe Early had to duck because he got knocked down by his father.
Because when I discuss with friends of mine all the the way they use pitchers now, I said, and when you come to all the pitchers that would tell the manager where to go with the 100-pitch limit, Early Wynn, I always mention Early Wynn. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you for a fact
he would knock his mom down.
Yeah, no, that's true, absolutely true. And the fact is, back then, and I've said to many people, the way they do it today, a quality start is 5 innings or 6 innings or whatever. But if a manager ever back then, went out to the mound to pull a Feller or Wynn or Spahn or Drysdale or Koufax, whatever, pull him out of the game, he says, they just say, hey, you get your rear end back in the dugout. I'll take care of business out here.
Bob Gibson was like that also, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's
and
a different
also,
game.
George, your father, from what you told us in one of the podcasts, your father was very close to Mickey Vernon.
Yeah, he was. Mickey was a very close family friend, and Pam, I'm not sure you have a lot of articles, but there were quite a few articles in the Sporting News about Mickey, and Mickey was a great player, 2-time American League batting champ, and I think he's been overlooked for the Hall of Fame, but he was a terrific first baseman, and then when Mickey was named the manager of the Senators, the expansion team, after the 60 World Series that he was coaching for Danny Murtaugh, but Mickey took the job in Washington. The first person he called for be one of his coaches was my father, and my father had been coaching at Rutgers and was very happy there. But he told me and told many others. He said, "Well, if it hadn't been for Mickey, I would have never taken the job because I was very happy at Rutgers."
Yes. Well, he knew a good man.
Yeah. He was very Mickey Vernon was very close to Danny Murtaugh.
Yeah, they were. They grew up together,
in the
Alan.
same town. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and he was military.
Danny was from Chester, Pennsylvania. Mickey was from Marcus Hook, which is the next town over. And they grew up together, played ball against one another, and they were extremely close friends.
Oh, okay. I've been kind of keeping my eye out for an article. I promised to do one on his military, on Mickey's military. And
yes.
Of course, you've got your nice DVD, but I'm kind of I like to start my articles with a picture, and then from there it goes into, what am I going to say about them?
Right. Right.
So,
well, Mickey, one thing you might be interested in, Pam, Mickey was in the U.S. Navy, and he was stationed in the Pacific. And one of the players that he met, and they later became teammates, who hadn't even been playing in the major leagues at that point, was Larry Doby. Wow. And Larry and Mickey became teammates with Cleveland in 1949. But Larry Doby met Mickey. They were both stationed in Saipan in the Pacific during World War II.
Well, let me ask you this: Did Larry play on the team? Well,
I think he did. I think they were playing. Mickey was playing too. They were on the base team. I'm not sure which base it was, but some of the best ball players in the world in the major leagues during those years, during World War II, were actually playing on the service teams. And you had Great Lakes and Norfolk were the two bitter rivals in during the war years. Both of those teams were stocked with former major league ball players who later, after the war, would come back and play. Now, some of them were assigned to units, and their job really was to play ball, so it was more of a PR thing than anything else. But some of them actually faced combat. Bob Feller was an anti-aircraft gunner on the USS Alabama, and and the fact is that Cecil Travis had his feet frozen in the Battle of the Bulge, and Buddy Lewis flew the hump in Burma. So and Hank Greenberg was a forward spotter in the U.S. Army Air Corps. So some of them didn't have the cushy jobs. They actually had combat and had to be prepared for combat, just not for their baseball skills.
Yes. Absolutely.
Also, Yogi was on one of the boats. He was in the Navy.
Right.
That led the troops into Normandy on D-Day.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Alan. He was on a rocket boat, what they call a rocket boat. They launched the rockets, into the German lines off the beach, and Yogi was one of the seamen. He was only, I think, 18 or 19 years old at the time.
And also Warren Spahn fought in combat in Europe.
Right.
And some writer asked him several years later, he asked him if he was ever scared in a baseball game. And Spahn looked at him, and said, "Scared the baseball game." He says, "I was in combat for however many years.
Right.
And you think a ball game is going to scare me?"
Yeah. Well, that's it. And Pam, I'm sure that you can find out a lot of interesting stories. And World War II era Major League Baseball, I mean, it was a very interesting time. My dad was 4F, so he was allowed to keep on playing. But, the quality of baseball obviously was not what it was before or after the war. But President Roosevelt recognized the fact that it was a morale boost, and they still wanted to have Major League Baseball and the troops, and they would read the sporting news, just like we talked earlier. I mean, this was part of the morale of saying to the United States and the citizens of the country, hey, we're fighting in a war, but we still have some normalcy in our way of life.
Absolutely. I have an old all-star program. It was Army against Navy, and
right.
I kind of read up on, I think it was I can't say right off the top of my head, but anyway, it just to hear the details of that game was just, I think Navy walked away with it, but it was just, it was one of those things where you're like, gosh, I wish I could have been there,
Right.
I wish I could have seen that, and,
yep.
And it's just, and the rosters were unbelievable. I don't know too many teams that would have had that many stars, playing for them. So.
Right. Well, no, that's very, Pam, that's very true. I mean, as I mentioned to you, the two major bases, Great Lakes Naval Training Center and Norfolk, they were peppered with Major League ball players. And the fact is that they would, sometimes the commanding general or whoever it was, the person calling the shots would say, hey, we got to get some of those players on our roster. So they might have been in the service, but they were there to play ball, and they probably had a lot of money that was being waged on whether Army was going to win or Navy or whatever it is, because those were some bitter rivalries.
Oh, well, absolutely. Well, and like you said, it was a little piece of home, and that was that. I mean, to minimize, those players doing that, it would be wrong, because boosting morale in a time like that, it was just priceless.
Well, it's an interesting era, Pam and Alan, and a lot of people, they poo-poo it, they overlook it, but baseball was the national pastime. That's what it was. I can't say that baseball is the national pastime today, but back then, people did it, and I'll tell you one quick little story. I don't mean to dominate this discussion, but we're talking about World War II. Dutch Leonard, the great knuckleball pitcher who pitched for Washington and later the Cubs and the Phillies, Dutch was over in Europe just prior to the Battle of the Bulge, and he was there making an appearance, and he came back through the lines, and the sentry asked him for his password. And Dutch forgot his password, and he said, "If the guy didn't recognize me, he'd have probably shot me." So, but he recognized it was Dutch Leonard. I mean, that was the impact that the players on the servicemen. They knew these great Major League ball players. They knew them by not only by name, but they knew what they looked like.
Wow, just amazing. They had that in common,
Yep. They sure did.
So, yeah.
Sabre came out with a book a number of years ago. They did short biographies on a lot of the players who were the replacements during from 1943 to 1945.
Right.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Alan. Alan mentioned Sabre. Pam, are you a member of Sabre?
I was for a while. Back in the 90s. I had always intended to come up and do a show and bring a lot of paper. I was always told, you'd be a success at the Sabre meetings. You should come, And I did join. A friend of mine there in Dallas, Paul Rogers. He was the dean of law there at SMU, and he's written a couple of books. And
right.
He kind of twisted me in there, and but I just it's just one of those things. I quit doing shows and had some things going on personally, and I should rejoin. They're now in Birmingham, and they're at Rickwood Field. It doesn't
right.
get any better,
right.
as far as a venue, and but I just haven't done it.
Let me ask you about Rickwood Field, because I've never been there. I only know about it, but that is it still being used for baseball, or is it just like a museum? I mean, do they still play baseball there?
They play baseball there, and some of the local college teams and play there, and some of the the teams that are like from the 1800s, they dress in the old and use the old equipment.
The vintage baseball, right? Okay.
Yeah, and they've shot part of 42 there, and Cobb, and they've done a few movie things out there, and yes, it's a really really a cool jewel to have held on to it this long. And I know a lot of the people who are and friends of Rickwood that donate their time and money to an old park like that. It's built in like 1910, and
right.
So you got to keep it up. The city owns owns it, but just like with any city, we don't have money in the budget, so but they tend to spruce things up when there's going to be a movie or something like that. But
right.
It's rented out to people. They have tournaments. It's actually pretty busy these days. So.
Well, that's interesting. I'm really, I love baseball history, and that field certainly is part of baseball history. And the fact is that you said it was built when, in 1910? Is that?
Yeah, it's actually the oldest operating ballpark in America.
Wow.
Now,
did they add Pam? Did they add lights, or what have they done to the field? I mean, obviously, when it was built, they didn't have lights, but for later day use, did they add lights?
They do, and I want to say they came out of. I know that seats from the Polo Grounds went in there, and they used them for a number of years. And I want to say some of the lighting was from either the Polo Grounds or Forbes Field.
Right,
It was kind of built on Forbes Field style.
Oh, was it? Yeah.
It sure was, and I mean, like a smaller version of it, but yeah, it's they've done some renovating, and but they've tried to keep it as original as possible.
Right. Well, you mentioned Forbes Field. I'm going to get off here because I want Alan to talk to you about Forbes Field. Alan has a lot of experience with Forbes Field. The fact that he went to the University of Pittsburgh. And Alan, you might want to tell a few before we close, a few Forbes Field stories.
Okay. The main reason I wanted to go to Pitt, I was 17 at the time, in 1960. Was because Forbes Field was 2 blocks away.
That's a good draw.
Yeah, and my father, who was not a baseball fan, wanted to go to see it before he let his precious son go there. And so I picked the weekend that they were in California, so I wouldn't be tempted. And when I got
he would see it.
Yeah. And when I got there, when I started school there, You know, in those days, the bleachers were $1. And if you got ambitious and wanted to sit in the grandstand, that was $3.
That was for the important games.
Yeah. So, anyway, I'm there in 1960, and I made a couple of friends there from people who would go there for basically every night game. And the day games on the weekends when school class wasn't in session. So a friend of mine who I still keep in touch with, lives in Philly, and I was watching the 7th game in 1960 on a TV in the dorms. And just as soon as Hal Smith hit the home run to put the Pirates ahead in the 8th inning, we ran over to Forbes Field. I had a transistor radio with me so I could keep up with what was happening. And we were able to sneak into the left field bleachers. And we crouched down, and the security was watching the game. Yeah. So we saw Mazeroski's home run.
Amazing.
And we both decided that if that game had gone extra innings, we might have gotten arrested. I bought a program for 50 cents on the way out. Yeah. But I was there from 61 to 60 to 64, and that was my second home.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
And in those days, I went to a lot of Steel games there also, and in those days I could handle cold weather or rainy weather. Yeah, but I just really, really loved the place. In fact, one of my friends and I got in there in 1971 after and they were ripping it up, and it was ripped up. The seats were broken. The grass turned into weeds and was very high. And we got in through the center field gate. They used to open that up. In fact, a number of times they would open up after the 7th inning. We'd get in there, and sometimes the game would go extra innings, so we're getting baseball for nothing. So anyway, I'm standing looking at this, and I started to cry.
Oh,
yeah, because the ballparks in those days had character.
Absolutely.
And when they started replacing them with all the multi-purpose stadiums, they were all the same. The only way you could tell the difference was by the advertising on the And when they closed up Three Rivers, I didn't feel anything.
Wow.
Because it had no personality.
Well, you had all those great memories,
Oh, yeah. And, it was just a great place to go. And I made sure that my parents never found out about how much time I was spending there.
Well, as long as you kept your grades up, you were okay, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a great place to watch a ball game. You could, the Weezers were in left field, and when the opposing team's bullpen was right by the left field bleachers, so we used to yell at the players there, and I'd sometimes have conversations with them for a few minutes, and it was a totally different experience. Yeah.
It's not like that now. I don't think you can probably get near them.
No, like I used to go to Yankee Stadium a lot, and I always put down that the old Yankee Stadium was a shrine. This new one is just somebody put down that it's a mall around a baseball field. And it's just another ballpark. It's just the old places were and all those old parks had their own quirks.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's what made them special, and I guess they're relegated to our memory, and that's not a bad thing, I don't guess, but you feel sorry for kids coming up now, they won't have that experience.
No, there's one story I read in several places that in 1952 the Yankees were playing the Dodgers. So Casey Stengel is taking Mantle on a walk around the outfield there, because Ebbets Field had unbelievable number of quirks. And he's telling Mantle that the ball comes off this, when it hits this place, it comes off that way, blah, blah, blah. So Mantle looks at Casey Stengel and says, "You mean you played here?" And Stengel says to him, "Yeah, you thought I was born 60 years old?"
And he was quite the ball player in his day, too.
Yeah. He was a very good ball player, and he got stuck managing. In fact, he was the reason that the Dodgers went to the policy of the one-year deals, because they fired him, I think it was 1936. In 1937, they had to pay him for not managing.
O'Malley took
O'Malley took control in 1950, and after 1950, and O'Malley decided he was never going to pay another manager for not managing again. So after 53, Charlie Dressen wanted a 3-year deal, and O'Malley said no, and Dressen quit. And then he hired Walter Ralston, who was on 23 one-year contracts. That was probably the best thing that ever happened to the Brooklyn Dodgers. Was getting rid of Dressen. Yeah. Like I could talk forever on that, but
and Alan, I'm gonna hang up. But you know where Dressen went after that? He went to manage Washington.
Yeah.
So, they didn't like him too well in Washington either. So.
Yeah, well, he got jobs with the Braves and the Tigers after that, so he's part of the good old boy network.
Yep, right.
At the time, okay, I think we should end this now. I hope both of you enjoyed this. This has been fantastic.
Yeah, it was.
Well,
great.
I know I did, and Pam, I'm glad you and I had a chance to finally talk. We've been exchanging information on Facebook, so now we've been able to talk to one another. And again, I want to congratulate you on your baseball memorabilia. It's just wonderful.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate that, George. And I enjoy listening to the podcast, and I feel like I learn something all the time. I'm looking at it through a young person's eyes, I guess, and I'm real funny about who I want to listen to and let influence me. And you and Al are two really good ones that I look up to. So,
well, I appreciate that. Yep.
I put this together because I wanted you two to get acquainted.
Well, that's great, Alan.
It was great. I hope we can do it again.
I hope so. Yeah, I'm going to say good night now. Yep.
Good night, everybody.
Yep. Bye-bye. Thanks again, Pam.
All right. Thank you.